Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about some of the miracle stories that are happening right here in our own city, in our own state, every day. My name is Tony Kausha, and the title of our show is Tony's 50,000 Coincidence Miracles. Please note, this show is not about religion, and we're not trying to change anyone's religion, and we're not trying to get you to join any religion. It's just about miracle stories. I don't know of any religion on the planet that doesn't talk about miracles. That's why religions begin, because they have something that's telling them there's really a God. But we're not going to get into that. We're going to just talk about miracles and leave the decisions about all that up to you. So we don't care what religion you are. We just want to talk about miracles. If you are an atheist, I think you'll enjoy the program as well, although I can't guarantee you'll remain an atheist very long after you hear many convincing stories, coincidence kinds of stories about miracles. You can email me your own stories if you wish. We'll try to use all we can on the show. I can't guarantee we will, depending on volume and time, but you're welcome to send your stories on to us, and we will mention them when we can. You can send them to the following email address. But please notice that if we do use your story, we won't mention your name. We'll keep you anonymous. And we suggest that in your story, when you send it to us, don't use your correct name. That way anyone listening will not be able to figure out that it was you that sent the story in. The email address you can send your stories to is very easy to remember. It consists of 2 words and 3 numbers. The first word is Tony, spelled Tony, and the second word is and, spelled A-N-D, and the numbers are 777. So once again, the name is Tony and 777 at AOL.com. Well, let us begin. Our first coincidence miracle today is something that I experienced this past summer when I was handing out cards along the beaches in Connecticut. I go along the beaches and pass out cards to people who are interested in hearing about our book. And this past summer, I came upon a husband and wife and handed them the card. They asked about the book, and I was happy to tell them, a lot of the issues about the book and what it does to help people have conversations with God and to help notice miracles in their life. And I always ask people when I hand out the cards to tell me any miracles they've experienced in their lives. And so this couple proceeded to tell me about, at least the wife anyway, the wife was telling me that there was a time where she was at the wake of her dad, the wake and funeral of her dad, and her brother arrived for the wake and the funeral. Apparently he lived a long distance away, and she had not seen him for about 5 or 6 years. And she relates to us that when her brother came walking into the funeral parlor, she was just stunned because he was like the spitting image of her dad when he was younger, and she had photographs that could prove that. So she was stunned by that, and then later, when she was on the way to the cemetery in the limousine, she felt her dad's arm around her shoulder, patting her on the shoulder like he usually did when he was alive, and it was very familiar. Apparently it was very obvious to her because he did that in a certain way, and she felt that experience, and she said, it gave her goosebumps. And then she relates to us that 2 weeks later, her brother passed away, and she was at his wake and his funeral out of town. And again, when she was in the limousine going to the cemetery, she felt her dad's arm around her again and again in the limousine, and it was the same feeling. This same couple now told me that they thought our radio audience would be interested in this. I told them I have weekly radio broadcasts, and they said that they have another couple that they're very close with. They've been friends for a long time, and this other couple experiences amazing things when they're seeing miraculous things in life. And they've been present to see this themselves. And what happens to their friends is they often, a couple days before or after miraculous things happen, coincidence, miracles, miraculous things that impressed them, like even the stories that they just told me about, these funeral stories. But like 2 days before or 2 days after, this other couple consistently notices butterflies arrive mysteriously and flap all around for a while. They've seen owls, the birds that are owls. They've appeared, show up in the strangest times of days and strange places, like on their back porch, and they've never seen one before. And cardinal birds, red cardinal birds. And so they stressed the stories of the butterflies because they were there a couple times when butterflies had arrived, and then some miracle events had happened in the other couple's lives. But what they didn't realize while they were telling me this about their friends was that the prior people that I spoke to just before them, just a little farther up along the side of the beach, the shores there, I had spoken to someone else, and they had also just told me that they also experience many butterflies swarm around whenever they are noticing miracles in their life. And they related a couple of stories to me about cases where they see butterflies as well. And while we were talking about this on the prior blanket, about 3 or 4 butterflies came over and started landing on their blanket and flapping around while we were talking, and they were there with us for about 5 minutes while we were talking. I guess we talked for 10 minutes on that previous group at that blanket, but these butterflies lingered around there while they were telling me the story of butterflies. They lingered around there and flapped around for 5 minutes, and that was pretty amazing. And if that's not enough, after I left this second couple now, I've had 2 couples telling me about butterflies and owls and red cardinal birds. After I left them, about an hour later, further down the beach, there was another couple that started telling me about, they also see butterflies, and they related to me that they were at a funeral where they went to the cemetery, and while the coffin was being lowered down into the ground, a swarm of butterflies, they didn't tell me how many, but a swarm of butterflies came over, landed on the casket, flapped all around the casket for a couple of minutes, and the whole group was stunned by that event. So what's miraculous for me is I've just had 3 people in one day sharing with me butterfly stories that are pretty significant in their life. And they all relate that these butterflies or the owls or the red cardinal birds appear 1 or 2 days before or 1 or 2 days after the miracles are happening, if not indeed, like in the case of the coffin at the cemetery being lowered, indeed sometimes directly at the same time. So when you start seeing butterflies and owls and red cardinal birds, you might remember this and maybe look for some amazing events to be happening after that, or something amazing happened before that. And I'd appreciate you sending me emails about that and tell me about your butterfly stories. You can email me at tonyand777@aol.com. One more time, tonyand777@aol.com. Our next coincidence miracle is from one of our listeners who wrote to us telling us that they were a nurse on duty in a hospital, and an autistic child was abandoned by their parents at the hospital, and she was chosen by lots. The nurses, I guess, drew lots, and she was chosen to be the person who would care for this autistic child. And she relates that she cared for the child for 3 years, over a 3-year time period, until they could get someone to adopt the child. And that was her function. I don't know if she was doing that at the hospital or at a home somewhere later, but for 3 years she was in charge of taking care of that. And I guess she was one of the nurses because they had probably 3 shifts, three nurses. But she relates how blessed she felt to be doing this because the child was ultimately adopted, and she felt as if it was her child at that point, and she fell in love with the child, and the separation was hard. But in later years, she became pregnant, and she delivered an autistic son. And so she relates in her story that she was so well trained in the process of helping the other child that now she was, better suited and better able to handle her son. And she knew about all of the government programs and the insurance resources, etc. So she was well trained, and she knew how to get the best care for her son. But she relates this in her life was a tremendous miracle. Certainly it was a great coincidence that she was chosen by lot to care for an autistic child, and then later in life she gave birth to an autistic child herself. Our next coincidence miracle comes from a woman who wrote us a letter similar to several other letters like this we've received over time now, but she relates how she went to the doctor, found out that she had breast cancer, and she had several friends who belonged to a church. Apparently she belonged to that church too. They were all friends. And she called to go in and ask their prayer group, people who were designated to pray for people who have illnesses and are asking God for healing. And she relates that they prayed for her, and at her next examination with the doctor, they found that the breast cancer was gone. Our next miracle is from a couple who tell us that they had bonded with their family dog, and they had children as well. And those of you who have pets know that you can bond with them sometime, and you treat them like children quite often, especially in cases like a favorite dog. And they relate to us a story that the dog had developed a infection in their spine. I guess they brought it to the vet and found out about that. And as most of us find in our lives, when we talk to friends, they also found by talking to their friends that some of their friends heard about a vet who specialized in acupuncture and cortisone shots for spinal problems with animals. And so they grateful they got that input from their friends. They went to this doctor, and their dog was healed. So in their eyes, in their mind and hearts, they see this as a great blessing, that God helped them to have friends who knew something. We often get stories like this. When people are having problems, they often have friends or neighbors who bring up suggestions at the right time and the right moment. And this is another one of those cases. Our next coincidence miracle is a story from a woman who tells us that she had a heart attack. She lives alone. She was living alone. She had a heart attack. She fell on the floor, and her son, who was in the area driving by, he just had an idea. It popped into his mind, an idea to stop and visit his mom as a surprise visit. And lo and behold, when he got there, she was laying on the floor and having the heart attack. She was in the process of having the heart attack. And he was able to resuscitate her and save her. And truly, this sounds like a wonderful miracle, a coincidence. And quite often we get ideas in our mind and we get inspirations in our mind. And if we do those things, especially if it's a good thing, we find out it is God inspiring us to do things as this son just did. So I think whenever you get inspirations like this, something pops into your mind to do something good, you should pause and think about it. And if you can do it, if it's a good thing, go ahead and do it, because we have many, many stories from people who tell us they had a thought to do something kind and wonderful for someone. I remember a recent story. Someone was driving by a house and went in, and they also found a woman who had fallen down and she was bleeding, and they saved her life as well. So if you get ideas and inspirations, often they're from God, and you should react to them if they are good ones to do them. God bless you all. I'll talk to you next week.